Well, hello and Happy New Year. I'm J.B. Heron from the Old School Gun School. I'm lead instructor for the school. Oftentimes when we get together, we're talking about guns, we're talking about tactics, we're talking about the laws that you must know and understand. But I'm not here for that today. Today we're going to talk about not the laws that you need to know and understand. We'll talk about what about the lawbreakers, those that aren't caring about who they hurt or what they do. They have a whole nother agenda. And here on New Year's Day, we wake up to more terrorism. And that terrorism came to New Orleans. In New Orleans last night, you've probably seen it on the news already, unless you haven't watched TV yet. But on the news, you'll know that there was the bad actor. Yes, the bad boy. And so on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, it's New Year's Eve. And so it's actually just after the Eve. So it's actually New Year's way early morning, about 3:15, we say. And the bad guy decides it's a good idea to see how many people he can kill on Bourbon Street during a festive night like New Year's Eve, New Year's night. So he gets into a rented pickup truck that he staged for this. And lots of details here. I won't hit them all. But as he goes, he gets into the truck and he's going to drive down Bourbon Street as fast as he possibly can and see how many people he can hurt with his truck. So away he goes. And so one of the eyewitnesses said that as he heard the truck coming, he took his wife and they dove into a nightclub. And so the truck went by and he and the wife remained uninjured from that. But the truck did a lot of damage. And so as the guy came along, he hit and killed 10 people on the street, 10 deaths right there on scene. And another 2 or 3 dozen are still hospitalized and we don't know the outcome. And so he came through there, says our eyewitness, at speeds like freeway speeds. On Bourbon Street? Yes. So 50 miles an hour, 60, even 70 miles an hour. On a crowded street, how would you manage to dodge that kind of a threat? It would be very difficult, hard to even imagine. But that was his plan. He wanted to create some theater. He wanted to create some future for him. And the future for him wasn't in living much longer because he didn't plan to live through the night. But he wanted to be famous. And he knew if he did this, we would be talking about this guy forever. Sadly, a lot of that's the truth. I made some notes, so I'll go along with my notes as we talk. And so he's a bad guy. We'll call him a bad actor. And he rams into the crowd with his pickup truck, goodness sake. 10 he kills outright, and another 30 are hospitalized. But then he crashes into the barriers at a construction zone just towards the end of Bourbon Street. And that brings the pickup truck to a grinding halt. At great speed, he hit an unmovable barrier. And so I don't think he planned on that one. There were 30 extra law enforcement police officers on the scene last night because it's a big party town. And so if they're going to keep things squared away for all of us, we need some extra law enforcement. So there was like 300 extra law enforcement. And they were right there on the scene quickly. And once he crashed, out of the truck he comes with a rifle, not a handgun, but a rifle. And they find out later that there's a whole case of bombs that he has built in the backseat of the truck. So what he had planned after that, we can only imagine. But as he hops out of the truck, he engages with the officers in a gun battle. Ultimately, he wounds 2 of the officers. We believe they're surviving and in hospital care now, and that they will survive. But our shooter did not survive. And so the truck was decorated with an ISIS flag. And so we can imagine he had a political statement to make if he's going to wave that flag and drive down Bourbon Street and kill people. And so vehicles ramming crowds have become more and more common. I've looked some of these up because as I heard about this today, I said, wait a minute, this isn't the first time this has happened. It's happened before. And so I was reminded of other scenes. And so I'll pass some of those along to you. If you'd like to look them up, you'll have more to read. Here it is. More than 50 years ago, see, it's not a new thing. More than 50 years ago, a Czechoslovakian woman decided it'd be a good idea to use her truck to run over a crowd of 20 people. Wow. So she used her truck to drive over a crowd of over 20 people. 8 were dead at the scene, and the other 12 were hospitalized and ultimately survived. 50 years ago. Now, 40 years ago, this time we were in Australia. Let's go to Australia 50 years ago. A man drove a 25-ton Mack truck into a crowded bar, killing 5 and putting 16 others in the serious list in the hospital. What motivates this kind of thing? We don't know. Over 20 years ago, thinking of driving into a bar, in Killeen, Texas, Libby's Cafe, that was October 16th of 1991. And so many of you are familiar with this. At the time, it was the largest death count from any mass shooting ever in the United States. It's been surpassed now, sadly. But in 1991, it was the worst death count we'd ever had. And so our bad actor got into his pickup truck and drove through the plate glass windows of the cafe, rolling over the people seated in that area. And then those were killed, but he hopped out of the truck with his handgun and tried to execute as many as he could. Ultimately, he shot 50 people. About half of them died, and the other half survived in one way or another. And so, Killeen, Texas. In France, 10 years ago, at a lot of different locations, a man got in his car, and over the next 30 minutes, he ran over 13 people, 1 or 2 here, 1 or 2 there, 1 or 2 someplace else. So that was a little odd. That thing hadn't happened quite like that before. And so some were very seriously injured, but all survived. Now, another one 10 years ago, different locations, right? And then this one is going to be in France. In France, a man ran over a crowd of Christmas shoppers with his van. We see this can be more and more popular, running over the crowd of street shoppers. And he ran over the crowd. A man ran over the crowd in his van. And then afterwards, he attempted to commit suicide by stabbing himself. He survived. He was not successful with that. Maybe he needed a new plan. Again in France, just 8 years ago, boy, be careful how you go to France, a man used a 19-ton truck. Wow. A 19-ton truck to deliberately drive into a crowd of people celebrating Bastille Day in Nice, France. He hit more than 500 with a 19-ton truck. He hit more than 500 revelers. He injured 434 of them, but he left 86 dead. Police finally arrived and shot the driver. Evidently, the driver's religious beliefs differed from those celebrating Bastille Day. He was annoyed by that, and that's what motivated him to do what he did. Hard to understand. Now, back in Melbourne, Australia in 2017, not too long ago, a man drove his car into a huge crowd. He killed 6 of them and sent 28 to the hospital. Stockholm, Sweden. So we can go almost every place. Stockholm, Sweden, 2017. The bad actor drives his truck over a group of 20 people, killed 5 of them, sent the other 15 to the hospital. My. And then after that, Toronto, Canada. See, even Canada gets it. Toronto, Canada, in 2018, a man drives his van into a crowd and he kills 11 people and puts another 15 of them into the hospital. Annoyed with something. And this one, just last year, so pretty recent, just last year, a man in China, a Chinese man, 62 years old, and so he drove his car into a large crowd, killing 35 of the people that he ran over, and put another 40 of them into the hospital. My goodness. Just over 10 days ago, in Germany, at a popular Christmas bazaar, an outdoor market, a man drives his SUV into the crowd of shoppers. 25 people were killed, and another 235 were injured. Big crowd of people. And so now it's New Year's Day. So last night, no longer New Year's Eve because it was past midnight, so we call that early New Year's morning. This one hits a lot closer to home. Just a few hours ago, and you've probably seen this one, the killer drove his rented pick-em-up truck with the ISIS flag flying from behind, right? And he had a rifle by his side and a whole box of bombs and ran over 10 people. Dozens were injured, 10 deaths so far. Wasn't for lack of being prepared, but maybe they'll do different preparations next time. Remember, there were an extra 300 law enforcement officers on duty. Just not enough. You will be your own first responder. Have a plan. If we're going to talk about this some more, we'll talk about how to create a plan for travel like that. I'm going to say, well, I'm never going to go to New Year's Eve party again. I wouldn't give these guys that much power to control my life. I'd like to go to the New Year's Eve party. I'd like to go to 4th of July. I'd like to go to St. Patty's Day. All those things. I'd like to go Christmas shopping and be safe. And so being aware of your surroundings and making a plan. That's a whole nother talk, and we'll have that at a different time. For now, let's make the rest of this year a happy new year. We've gotten this problem out of the way. Let's make it a happy new year, and I hope we talk again soon. Happy New Year.